interest of time. And I'm going to, right away, Scott, I'm just going to turn it over to you.
Oh, okay. Well, I can say hello to everybody, and the point of our gathering now at 4 o'clock today was for a work session specifically regarding the golf course. And back in November, the conversation started with the introduction of a request for RFP for the golf course as we were looking to what to do with the expiring contract that was coming up. And then as we got a little further along, it was discovered essentially that there were some things that needed to get worked out. So there was a subcommittee formed. The subcommittee has met. There was a process to kind of work out a one-year lease extension, which we worked through, and that was approved at our last committee of the whole meeting, and we anticipate approving that tonight at our council meeting. So for the one-year future of the golf course, it looks like, things are settled basically to run as they have for the last several years. The question before us and the point of the work session tonight essentially is to try and get a handle on what our long-term vision is for the future of the golf course. From the city's point of view, can we answer this question? What do we want to see? What do we want to see in the long term as far as the process, how it operates, to what degree the city is involved in the day-to-day operations or not, and whether it's, this kind of an organizational structure or that kind of an organizational structure. So that's kind of where we come to today, trying to have just an open conversation amongst us about what we see as a long-term vision, and with the idea of an RFP that was floated and has kind of been, settled for a year now, and whether we're going to continue with that development of that plan or not. And I think that's as much as I can give as far as an introduction. And I think that we've got some folks here from the golf course to kind of give us their impressions too. And so unless you've got more to add, maybe we turn it right over to them.
Yeah, I don't have anything more to add to that. Thank you, Scott.
Okay. And we've got with us today, if you want to introduce yourselves, that would be best.
Dustin, you go ahead. Dustin Christensen at the golf course. Wade Jerkus, clearly we've practiced.
Correct. Yeah, so from our standpoint, getting to the lease was good to work through that. But the subcommittee, it was a very good conversation of agreeing on the one-year lease, but also leading us to why we're having this work session. Because since November 6th or whatever it was, even us as a board has really taken this as a volunteer board that we do a lot of time and effort because we have care and passion for the place. What is really the long-term vision that even us as a board see the golf course as? On the flip side, we also know that the city has a part in that as well, because it's the city's asset as of now of really managing a business with, I'd say, obstacles and hurdles for us to always go over, because we can't truly buy things without having approval that's not in the budget from the previous year, and we may not have those dollars to buy them if they weren't in the budget. Just one example, like we need what's called a VFD for our irrigation system. Well, that's $20,000. To give everyone a little bit of background, like the budget for the year I think is around $44,000 and change. After you take out insurance, the payment on the tool cat, and all the other expenditures and the cost when the city comes out that we pay for, we're left with like $21,000. Well, that doesn't take much. If we buy the VFD, we have no money to pay for any repairs or anything else for any of the improvement to the golf course or equipment. So in our view, looking through all those things, and that's just one example, but it's hard to run a business if you don't have money to run it, right? It just is. We need things to operate a business for us to go forward. So us as a board kind of got through those and saying, really what would be, in my mind, long term of a business is not 5 years. Even if we did, hey, let's just give them 5 more years. That's not really a plan in my mind, because you can't plan what's going to happen in 5 years at a golf course. And so us, as we look towards this RFP process, is how can we make this beneficial for both within reason? Meaning that what would be a fair solution long term when our members have, put in a lot of time, effort, and money over all the years, which you guys heard about at the last meeting, but what would be fair going forward for us to have an agreement at some point for the members or Pebble Lake Golf Club to own the golf course, with it always being a golf course for eternity, whatever that means in a lease or a 100-year lease, however you do it, and running it like a golf course with no obstacles, working with the city. And that has nothing to do with any personnel that's on that side or on our board. It has to do with the structure of how it's set up. It's hard to run a business that way. When we only get 7 months to operate, we sometimes can't wait a month for approval for a piece of equipment because we need that piece of equipment to run our golf course. So,
Dusty, just to interject, and VFD is a variable frequency drive, and it's used on the irrigation system.
yeah, so it's a piece of equipment that's $20,000. Yeah,
Yep.
but if we don't have that, for example, the one we have is 22 years old or something like that. If that goes down and we can't get one in, we could be out 6 weeks without having water for our course. So that's one example. So leading forward, that's kind of really why Wade and I wanted to have this session after the subcommittee has talked, getting the lease done. What would truly look like a long-term plan from the city? I mean, what does that look like? You look at, there's been $40,000 a year allocated since 2008. At that time, why $40,000 was in the budget? That was the most expensive piece of equipment at that time. Right now, that most expensive piece that we would buy is probably 120 guy, right? Somewhere in there. So it hasn't been adjusted since 2008 of that budget, which is at the fault of everyone. You know, we should have had it looked at before this last lease. I get it. So it's not saying let's change what's in the past, but in the current structure, if the city wants to maintain it as their asset, it's going to have to get visited in next year's budget with the tax and levy committee, which ultimately we know the city's only revenue source is what? Taxes. So it goes up on everyone, right? If we have to get 100,000 instead of 50, we got to pull it from taxes. And so is there a way where we can look at, in my mind, over 20 years at $50,000 a year, pretty easy math, that's $1 million. So I think the hardest part, if this is the route that the city would entertain of going, and we feel it would be over the next 2, 3, 4 months of still having committee meetings to figure out how it works, is how do we arrive at a price? We have an irrigation system that needs $700,000 put into it. We have equipment that's outdated and old, and a clubhouse that needs to be renovated. So that's kind of where we came to as a board of really coming to hear tonight of what that may look like, and if it's a possibility. Wait.
Let's open it up. Just want to hear back from you guys, some feedback. What are you looking for out of the club? What are you trying to do with this as a community asset? Do you want to maintain ownership of it?
So obviously, the first question that comes to mind is if the, well, there's many questions that come to mind when you talk about selling a city asset like that. First of all, I assume that people have looked into the idea of if it's legal to sell, right? Like if the
And
property.
it is.
Okay, so that's the first question.
But we'd verify that again. It's
Have
been
to
a while
verify
since we
that.
looked at that.
You know, to the average person out there that's not that's a, you know, it's a public course right now that have access to it. So that'd be the first question. And what would your thoughts be as far as maintaining it as a public course?
Always.
Yeah,
Okay.
always. Yep.
Yeah.
So that's a consideration, obviously, I think that people would reasonably ask. And then secondly, if the city didn't own the course, but it's a public course, if there was debt against whoever did own the course, that they weren't able to meet the obligations of their debt, would it forever be maintained as a public course, and how would that be addressed? So that's not something we have to answer
Yeah.
today, but that would be obviously a question, I think, that would need to be looked at, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and that's a very good question. I think that's the going forward as running the business, where even you say our building is, let's even say it's worth 150,000, maybe. I don't know what it's worth with it, what it needs to be done. For us to even have capability to say, you know, we will never be able to own a full fleet of new equipment. We can't charge enough. It'll never happen. It just won't work. If we were able to, within our debt service, with what we can charge, go out and buy auction items, because there's a lot of golf courses that have closed and are closing, and there's auctions throughout the year where you can pick up a $120,000 piece of equipment for $30,000 or $40,000. Well, right now we can't do that, right? Because we can't use our checkbook to do it, and we can't own the asset technically the way it sits. So I think you're right, but I think it would be within reason, like, well, the property's worth $1 million. You guys borrowed $800,000 over the last 10 years. No wonder why it didn't work. There may have to be some limitations on what's able to be borrowed against the value and how that's documented. You know what I mean? So
Yes, certainly. Just, I mean, there's
Yeah.
lots of things to consider
Yeah.
if the council were to go
Yeah.
down that road, but that's just one.
yeah, I agree.
I think this kind of fundamentally, we kind of have to decide, like, do we want to go down the road and pursue, is it feasible to sell it and then, or have basically, somebody else completely run that business, outside of the city's kind of remit, or, do we want to maintain our overall kind of quote management of it and be responsible for the day-to-day activity, because at the moment we aren't really in either camp. As we sit today, we own the asset and we piecemeal pieces of it that we want to try to control, but because we don't actually run the business, we're not doing a good job in what we do. And it's not like the liquor store, we own it, we own the inventory in it, we own the staff, and we dictate the pricing, and it's our asset and it's our business and we run it. I think it's so fragmented that we're not doing, I don't think we're doing a good job on it from anybody's side. The board, that's a volunteer board, they're restricted on what they have capability to do, and we're kind of like an absentee landlord as such, and we're not really giving it our all, and we don't really put a lot of effort into it. We basically give them $40,000 a year and say, go away. And so I think that's fundamentally, we have to kind of make that decision before we go down whatever route we go down, is do we want to basically, bring it into the city and manage it as if it was public works, where we have 100% control over everything? Or do we want to pursue a route where we look for a management group, to either purchase the asset or to have a 100-year lease on it, and they're responsible for kind of all items on it? And, the golf course has done well. I mean, there was nobody more critical of the golf course than me when I came on council. But because it was a drain, and every year, we were putting money into it, and there was kind of poor oversight. But we as a city are, share responsibility for that because we neglected it. And I think that's where, this has come to a kind of a head now. So it's like now we have to decide, and do we want to run it, or do we want somebody else to run it? And we can pursue a conversation with the current group that are interested in pursuing a purchase type agreement, or there's no point in going down there if fundamentally the council don't have an interest in that. And I think that's something that we have to decide. But one way or another, we have to start running it as a business. And I think that's where Dusty's coming from, and Wade. It's like they're trying to manage somebody else's asset.
And Wade and I discussed even just today, that's the $45,000. I mean, that's taxpayer dollars. It's a business. Taxpayers probably shouldn't be paying for this business because, like you say, it's an asset to the city. But if we can maintain the goals of the golf course from the city's perspective, always having a city amenity, and remove that off the budget and remove the issues and the conversations and the turnover of board. I mean, all of those things are that's why our opinion, if we can get to somewhere in the next 3-4 months, it doesn't have to be, if Wade or I, some reason, aren't on our board, now entertaining a new idea, and in 2 years, someone else isn't here. Well, what was going on with the golf board and what all happened? It's a constant, beating against the bush, where if the goal is to have it as a city asset, but have the golf course run it, let's just make it now so we don't have to entertain somebody in 2 years in the new city council or somebody from our board that doesn't know what we're going through, right? So. So I
I
agree with you, Anthony.
have a question. Are we actually able to sell that golf course? Or was that given to us as a golf course to always be a city property?
I think we can sell it, but we will verify that with, with Rolf.
When
But
Rolf
we-
comes in tonight, Rolf and I had a conversation, I think in December. Mr. Your brother-in-law and I had a conversation about starting this process, and I talked to him, and he said that it is a saleable piece. There's no restrictions on it. He just said the biggest thing is to come up with a price. And of course, we did this 2015, when Sievert was still here, we talked about selling it and what was it worth, and we did some research on it, and nobody could really give you an answer.
Yeah.
Because nothing was selling at that time, but now, of course, stuff is sold since then, so.
Yeah, and I think it's in my mind, a saleable price is also what is the scope and what is the true purpose of the sale. Is the sale just to bring in $1 million and get rid of that off of our budget? Well, good luck finding anyone that would pay that much, because you have to put in $1 million to make even it go, and then all of a sudden your cash flow does not work, right? So I think that truly will be one of the biggest hurdles of, yeah, the land's worth this, but in my mind, the land isn't worth anything if we're always going to keep it as a golf course, as a city asset, instead of selling it for a development company. If you want to go out and do that, that's your guys' choice. But the land really isn't worth anything to someone that wants to run it as a golf course, because you have to have the land to run the golf course, right? Not lots.
I don't think anybody in the council wants to sell it off and
Yeah.
develop it. That's not
No,
even,
we
that's
don't
not even a
either.
question about it at
Correct.
all.
The
I just,
golf courses, I think, the saleable price on golf courses is what they bring in income for a year.
the revenue, right?
And
Correct.
we don't.
Minus what you have to invest in,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
There's a
right.
heavy
So,
investment
so,
required.
so it's not worth anything to anybody,
Yeah.
because
It's worth
it's
a lot
not,
to people,
you know,
But I think it,
it's worth to us, I understand.
but I think it's worth, it's worth something. I'll just talk that, Belmer also over 2.5, I think it was.
2.3, yeah.
2.3.
Yep.
So that kind of gives you a little bit of an idea, I'm not saying, I'm just using it that we kind of know, where before we didn't know anything. My thing is, the biggest thing, we know we did 28,000 rounds of golf, right? 5,000 was, I don't know how to call it, non-card holder, not season card holders, and 23,000 rounds were. So I think that the golfing is there, it's just that how the revenue is going to come in. And how to, raise that revenue. I was talking about the city putting more money in it, but if the city run it, we'd look at trying to raise revenue with, like the business, like you guys are doing, same, that's how I would look at it. We know the rounds are there, just how do we get, I think I figured it out, was like, if you're a season card holder, your round is $12 throughout the year, on an average, whoever, a lot of people play more than others, I know that, but,
No, you're off there a way.
well, how many members do you have?
We have 315 members, and for example, me, I live on the golf course, and last year I played Fergus Falls 22 times, and it was $1,900. So I
But if you
added
took
up.
315 into 23,000 rounds, how many rounds is that?
Yeah, and that's the difference for sometimes.
I'm just saying, just on an average.
You can't do that.
But just on an average, and then you divide that out, how much it costs for your members. So that's how I got to it. That's a money thing, a numbers thing. So I'm just saying, the rounds are there to make money. That's what I'm saying, as a business. So if we took it back ourselves, which I'm looking to that for this next year, that's what I want to do. I don't think there's enough votes to do it, to take it back. We could run it ourselves and look at it. You guys can get your ducks in a row to buy it, or RFP it, because I think the RFP is still on the table, is it not? For everybody, for anybody in July? We didn't take that off the table. That's
It's
still,
my understanding it's still there.
still there. And so that's just one of the ideas I wanted to float out there and talk about it. I mean, that's, to looking at how, I'd like to figure out this, you have 23 rounds of 315 members, 23,000 rounds, I mean, that's a lot of rounds. And you got 5,000 rounds of paying, whatever you want, I don't know how you call them, but your regular customer.
Yeah, I think if we had Kevin here, that'd be a little different.
Yeah, and I
the
wish-
demographic, because we have kids that play 2 rounds a day.
So I understand that, so, it's just, but I mean, it comes down to the rounds are there, it's available to it, but how much can you get the revenue off of it? So-
Yeah, and I think, like you say, that's with current management and the work that we're doing in, that's why we're getting that, right? And that changes, and you don't know if you have, like you say, everyone's employees not gonna stay no matter what happens. If you know, I don't know, that'd be the tough part.
We have tee times every day out there. And one of our guys played 80 rounds, but we don't play near the rounds that we used to. I mean, I had one year where I had 110 rounds. So my round was quite low, you know, per round. But as I've gotten older, it's more like 40 now, so, you know.
But just looking at it as a business standpoint, I'm
Yeah.
saying that the rounds are there. You've got enough people going through, you just gotta figure out the revenue to get that back in your pocket.
And we don't want to charge too much, we want to keep it affordable that we can. And I think even when you say this, we take it back for 1 year, and then, in my opinion, I don't think there'd be any way that, unless all of a sudden you said, yeah, you know what, here's $1 million and you guys can buy it this year, fine. I think it's going to be a year of 3 or 5 with a purchase at the end of it with a structure. That would be my opinion. Because we can't do it, we can't write a check for whatever it is this year, right? But if we have an agreement that says, you know what, Pebble Lake Golf Club, if the city does X over the next 3 or 5 to get us in a position to fix the infrastructure that was theirs, that's been, I'd say, neglected for a bunch of years, and get us in a position for success, then a purchase can happen at the end of that. So instead, back to what I said, instead of having the city council move and we move, an agreement gets in place. There over the next 5, the city would do this, of how we get that there from the building and the irrigation, and then the purchase is already in place, unless something goes astray.
And so what happens if somebody comes in that wants to purchase it other than people in this room? I mean, what do we do then? I mean, is there something, that's just, go ahead, Al.
You can finish.
No, I'm done. I mean, that's just, I mean, we almost have to put it out there and see what's available, who wants to buy. If there's somebody else, you know, I don't know. I have no idea. It's a conversation we can't overlook.
Just some comments from the last time you guys were here. You know, there's a lot of passion. You've worked very hard. There's been people in this community that, you know, lack of a better term, would kill for that golf course. Do whatever they could to keep it going, to keep it in your control. And when you have people like that, that's like one of the most loyal employees you will ever have. As with many businesses, with this particular economic situation that we have, it's hard to find really good employees. It's hard to find that. People leave jobs all the time. I don't see any of your crew walking off the job. That golf course isn't worth anything without somebody to run it. Like any other business in this town, there's some that are very, very on the edge. If you don't have key employees that really know what they're doing, that business is completely worthless. And that company that can come in and buy that business for millions of dollars is not going to touch it because they know that. So I think that you people are the best to run it. It has been a passion for this city and for a lot of the people who play out there. As I mentioned, I first went out there when I was in grade school. And that's been a long time ago. And there's memories. You guys know the golf business. I don't think we do. Maybe Jim does. But I don't. Who better to run it than the people who've been running it? And if you have other ideas, which I'm sure you do, that are going to create profits, like I think, you know, another venue for a place to get together and to have a really great clubhouse and a restaurant. You know, there's great strides there. And I commend you for that. Maybe that could go year round. And then you have the say in it. You have the control. And it would alleviate, I would think, some issues with the city. You can run it how you want to run it. You know, just because it's underneath the premise of a government doesn't mean it's going to be run any better. You're going to know how to run it because that's what you guys do. Just some comments.
Dusty, when you say end up buying it, who is going to buy it?
Yeah, good question. So a similar structure, which I was the president of Minnewaska Golf Club for the past 12 years, that is what the terminology is semi-private, how it's set up as a corporation. The members own it. So when you say that, who would buy it? We would have to find ways through fundraising, whatever the price we agree on, to get there at the end of 5 years as a membership. We probably have a fundraising committee that says we need X to buy this place, and that's how it would happen. So who would be the owners? Technically, the members are.
Members would be.
That's it. They just own it. And you know, ultimately, in my mind, owners always think differently. They just do. And when you own something, you're a part of it. Not only you may be willing to contribute more because you know where it goes. Right now, the city owns it. Some people don't always like how the city spends their dollars. They don't want to give it to the golf course. That structure could change. Saying, I know exactly where it's going to the people that are running it, and we need X amount for fixing tee boxes, and this is what it's going to cost, and we can go raise it. So, yeah. So to answer your question, it would be classified as semi-private so we could maintain tax status appropriately, but the members would be, then we'd have to create new bylaws with it. You know what I mean?
And we've talked for years about getting that group together to do some fundraising, and it hasn't been put together yet. We need to do that.
That is done.
So,
To answer that question, that is done.
It is done?
It is.
Fantastic.
Yep.
I think too, is what you're talking about, Jim, is basically skin in the game. You know, you're gonna work really hard. If you got some skin in that game, you're gonna work very hard for it. And hey, what a better deal.
I think for me, the bottom line is that I think everyone would agree that we want a public course. It's an asset to the city for a lot of different reasons. You know, for people coming in, for tourism, for the members of the community. How we get there, if we can get there, I mean, through a sale to the Pebble Lake Golf, I'm not in favor of selling to anybody other than the Pebble Lake Golf Club. I'll go on record as saying that because I think there's a history there. I think there's investments that have been made. But if we can structure a deal that is beneficial to the taxpayers, that achieves the goal of having a public course that's an asset to the community, that protects, you know, the structure. Well, and by the way, if we structure that deal so that the city and the taxpayers are protected, you're going to significantly reduce the price of that. You know, it's a partnership. It's more than a sale. It's a partnership is what it is. It's just slightly changing the ownership and the control for the same goal, right? So anyway, I think we would be foolish not to go forward with consideration to have the group that's working on it currently continuing to work on exploring. I don't hear anything differently from the group, anyone that doesn't want to at least entertain the idea, unless I'm
all in.
I could add a couple of things, I guess. What I would expect somebody to say, so I'll just speak for somebody, but not necessarily for myself, is that if the city was going to sell anything, let's say we were going to get out of the liquor store business and we wanted to sell the liquor store, we wouldn't just sell it to the liquor store manager. We would say, okay, anybody out there want to make a bid? And it would end up becoming more of an open process to anybody that wanted to buy it. How do we answer that question is what I'm getting at, is that, you know, we've got a group that's very interested in buying it and have got invested interest because of their long partnership and activity there. And yet when the time comes for the city to actually try and make a deal with somebody, there's going to be somebody out there that says, well, I might have been interested in making that deal. You know, how do we answer that question? How do we put a deal together to sell something without it being open to the broader public, so to speak? So how do we answer that question? I'm putting that out there.
Well,
I guess the other thing is, can we legally do that? Because anything over a certain amount, we have to go out for bids on.
Well, I was getting to that a little bit when I talked about the contract, because obviously you'd have to, in my opinion, if I was going to support it, you'd protect it that no individual is going to make money on the deal. It's going to remain as a public course in perpetuity, right? Right there, you eliminate any open market sale. right? And I wouldn't,
Would be a nonprofit.
Yeah, it has to, so the
Yeah, it
tax
has to be
status
a
is a
nonprofit.
nonprofit, and anything that's made goes back into the course. I mean,
I
that's
was
just,
just
that's what
gonna
it
s-
is.
I looked up the Velmer, their taxes are about $9,000 right now,
Yeah.
so.
so I think the way you structure the deal, again, the course would not be able to be sold to a third party 5 years from now. The way I see it anyway. I mean, we're not setting ourselves up to
Well,
have.
that would be the way you'd structure the contract.
Yeah,
then.
and I think the way you structure the contract, and the city attorney would have to weigh in, of course, but there are certain requirements that you'd be able to get around just because of the public benefit that the deal would.
And you as a council can choose to sell, and then we just, we do it over 2 meetings. That's kind of the safeguard there too, is introduce it at one, and then it comes back a second one, rather than, you know, because we've sold various property other times without putting it as an open market bid or something like that.
And of course, if there's any public benefit, which that's the whole point of some of the items that we're talking about, then that totally changes the equation as far as how you have to go out for bids and request for proposals, et cetera. Does anyone, I don't hear any opposition to continuing the conversation. Scott and Anthony, you guys are, I'm assuming that this topic has come up in your discussion.
Again,
so
we
far.
didn't go into any great detail, but yes, the idea of this as a potential future was discussed
Yeah,
as a
and
possibility.
I think we were just looking for, you know, obviously direction from the council whether there's an interest in pursuing that line of kind of inquiry at this point in time. You know, if the majority of the council was not, willing to explore the possibility of a group taking it over, then obviously that conversation is dead, and we just focus on a kind of an RFP to lease it in some form of what it is today.
And I think then to build a little on what Anthony had said earlier is that what we have learned in the last several months is that the current structure really isn't working very well. And so that we really need to take a different approach. And so then if that approach is to go down this road toward a sell option sooner or later, whatever that time frame might be, if it was directed towards selling, then that would be one approach to go. The other one would be to go toward taking it fully under the city's umbrella, where it becomes basically a part of the Park and Rec Department, where all of the employees there are strictly city employees. All the equipment there is owned by the city. The management of it is just like another department of the city, where we've got hands-on activity daily. That's just a part of the operations of the city, where we've got to pay attention to it more on a daily basis, rather than just expecting it to be done by somebody else.
And it would be much more expensive to having it run by the city, because all those employees would be getting vacation time, they'd be getting sick time, they'd be getting
Benefits.
retirement, insurance, health insurance, the whole works. So it amounts to a heck of a lot more money if we are running it than if these guys are running it.
I'd say that's likely true.
Yep.
And being able to lay all that out and weigh the values is what we haven't done, but probably need to do, at least in some form, so that we can say, yes, this is a better deal, or this is a better deal. One way
Through
or
the
other.
years, if it hadn't been for our mechanic out there, we would be in deep doo-doo, because he's got some of those machines running 2 and 3 times as long as what they're supposed to be running, but he's good. We ever lose him, and then we are in deep doo-doo, unless we can start replacing some of the lawnmowers and the equipment that we have on them.
I assume through the process, all of the different possibilities explored as far as like 99-year leases with control of operations versus a sale versus tax liability and all that stuff. I mean, you guys are smart.
I think the biggest thing about it, all those things are to protect the city and to protect us, right? To protect the golf course, but protect the city of making sure that it stays the way that it is from how it's run as a public golf course, but just alleviating the middleman's kind of getting out of it.
I think we would like to protect ourselves, so the sale went to you guys, and no, if you lost it back to, we took it back, we wouldn't want to have any money borrowed against it. That's the only thing that I would say would be really hard about it. And then be a public golf course. I think that's just two things you gotta really look at and cut it down to, this is what's gonna happen. And of course, it's gonna take some money to fix it. If you buy it, it's gonna take a bunch. So if we take it back, it's gonna take a bunch for us to fix it. So it's like, being on the tax levy committee, it's not a fun job.
For sure.
And so I don't foresee anybody getting any more money in anywhere, type of deal. It's just hard to do.
Have you got Paul working on a 501c3?
The information I'll give you is that's completed. Yeah.
Good.
Is there any excess land out there that's not, that people wouldn't normally associate with the golf course? Is it all contained within what we know as the golf course?
You mean any buildable areas? Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, I just,
Yeah, up on the hillside behind the beach,
yeah.
there's some treed property in there.
Treed property with a hill like
Like
that.
steep,
It's
could take over Old Smoky.
be awful tough to build on
Yep.
Yeah, and I think that would be, again, part of that, even if, we want to turn it into a 9-hole golf course and sell 9 holes, we have to have in that
Yeah.
purchase that no land is ever to be sold, you know what I mean? So,
Just going back to running the business, we know you can run we know it can generate the rounds. We know it can do that. I mean, so just got to figure out the volume of money. Because if you buy it, you're gonna have to figure out how to make more money with it than you are right now, plain and simple. You got a good renter, and she pays good, and it didn't seem like that helped, but it didn't bring you up over that line, So,
and that wasn't the point, it was taking that stress of that business out of it and the inventory and all that stuff. I mean,
I know
we
that.
made more, but adding an amenity not only to the golf course, but to the city. So we didn't lose money on it and added a ton of value to our course.
I think it was good, yeah.
Yep.
And we had to
Good-
make
good
some
deal.
investments to allow that to happen.
Right.
Which cut off our line this year, so.
And to having that open year-round, there needs to be a lot of work done to the clubhouse to do that, because it is
Like a new one.
not insulated.
We couldn't do it with that one.
A lot of glass in front and yeah. Big bucks.
We explored that feasibility of winterizing, did we not, Guy, 7, 8 years ago, and it's not feasible. It's just
We
It's
were,
challenging.
yeah,
We'll
we
leave it
were
at that.
saving up for doing that, but
a new one or something. But I don't think,
Heating and air
was it feasible
conditioning
because of what the roof structure was, and I just don't think it was feasible.
Just a comment on that, what's feasible and what's not feasible. There's two different feasibilities. One, if it's feasible for a city, or if it's feasible for a private
Right.
or a company like you. It's much more feasible for you guys than it is for this city.
Yeah, and that's, like you say, that's part of all the conversations of what this thing really is worth. When we have to put in X, it's, we have CapEx expenses they're gonna be involved into making this thing really work. Or else in 7 years, you guys get it back because the building's falling apart, the irrigation broke. Sorry, guys, thanks, we're out of here, you know what I mean?
So, there's an existing committee, you guys seem to have the direction you need to continue conversations with the group?
Yeah, I think so.
I think so. I think that it's clear that we want to maintain it as a city amenity and as a publicly accessible city amenity. I think that some of the comments made about it being a drain on the city, for example, that were made earlier, with any city amenity, I suppose you can define it that way. I mean, the airport's a drain on the city if you want to look at it that way. We spend an awful lot of money to have an airport. We spend money on having a library. We spend money on having a fire department. So pick your department. And they're all important to one or the other person that might be standing there saying, this is what we should have and we don't need that one. There's a lot of folks that think that golf course is a really important amenity, and I would agree that it is. There's probably fewer people that use the airport than use the golf course. And yet there's real high value there. And so putting some kind of number to the value, I think, is how we were trying to answer one of these questions about something that doesn't have a number to it right now, but it still has to be weighed as this is valuable and it's important, and so we're going to do X to accomplish it.
We'll put a combo deal together with the airport, you can buy that too.
There you go.
Well, my time's up, I'm out of here.
There was a time years ago where in order to serve on the board, you had to buy a share of stock. And I think it was $100 at that time. Another
I think
area
we
to
can get
look
very,
at.
if this goes that right, the route that we hope it to go, I think we can get very unique in fundraising, in having people pledge X over X years, and that can be used with a 501c3 status towards projects and even operation at that point. So, yeah.
You were wondering if we've got clarity to move forward. I think the thing that we being this subcommittee, would maybe need some clarity on, is going to need Rolf's input on the questions of the legality, under what kind of a structure can this be done or not? And then to what limit are we to, can we keep it to just one buyer, one potential buyer? And whether or not any effort we make to put together a proposal to sell it, if that can only be to a specific, or if it can be open to anybody to pick it up. You follow me? I don't know if I said that very clearly, but that's something that probably Rolf can answer for us better than I can guess at it. But that would make things a lot clearer for us. I mean, if we knew that we could go this way and have just a single buyer in the future process of it and not be in trouble doing it that way, okay. But if we knew that we march on that road and get to the end, it's like, okay, now open it up to everybody. It's like, well, that wasn't how we were marching. We need to know that before we get very much further along.
Yeah, and I like, the single buyer, the tough part about it is that, but we're also selling to, in my mind, the 315 current members and all the members previous. And that's who it's really getting sold to. It's Pebble like Golf Club Inc. that's buying it, but it's truly an organization of people that have put time, money, and effort over time. So you may not be just limited to just, we're just selling it just to Pebble Lake Golf Club. There's a reason why we're doing it and justifying it, so.
As you continue your conversation, the one thing that I would be interested in is, you mentioned Dusty with the other golf, with the W, what was it again?
Minnewaska Golf Club, yep.
And as a semi-private, you'd mentioned, and just how that, not that we have to solve this today, but just for consideration, like how the general public that aren't members, how that affects them, and, all those considerations. That's just something I'm interested in, just, again, as right now, currently a public course where.
As far as, explain that a little bit more to make sure I answer it correctly.
So you mentioned that the members would own the course, and
Yeah.
as they do in Minnewaska, and it's semi-private, I
Yeah.
think is the term you used, whatever.
Okay.
Just like for the public, for it being a public course, how does the general public who's not a member?
Yeah, good question. I mean, like I say, a lot of that's around the culture you create, right? In my opinion, semi-private is the only word to really use because it can close for, let's say, a scramble. The course is closed today. Us at Fergus Falls, we have to maintain the course of still being open that day, and somebody can still come use it, right? So semi-private allows us to be public, but if you want to close it, you can, only for events, right? Sure. So I think that's, but they're really, when I came to Glenwood in 2008, it was semi-private. I go, what does that mean? And they're like, well, if you remember, you own it. Okay, well, that's really what it is. So there really isn't any part of being a member or a non-member. It's how the classification for the tax status really works, not for you can't come here because you're not a member.
Sure.
So there's everyone that, I mean, we have green fees, it's just the same structure. So, and that would be, if I was on the other side, the last thing, if someone did come in and want to buy this thing and say, yeah, we'll take over all of it and alleviate the city, you could probably see it someday going to 100 people, and those 100 people will just pay to manage it. That's not what we want to do. We want this to be a city asset for kids and everybody else. So, yeah, I feel nothing in my 15 years in Glenwood now that there's no one outside that feels like they can't come there, because we don't really, semi-private's not even on our website anymore. We just know it's semi-private due to the structure of how the tax works.
Sure.
Does that answer your question?
Absolutely. I just think that that's a consideration as
Yeah.
we move forward through discussions.
Yep.
'Cause I think that's
Yeah,
That's
and
important.
we could probably just still have it as a public golf course, it's just that the owner of that would be us.
Yeah, semi-private's a term from.
Way back when, you could buy shares,
50
that's
years
exactly
ago,
what you're
yeah,
talking
buy
about.
shares and-
Yeah.
I think we just leave it as a public golf course.
Yeah, and
If
I don't
we
want
can,
to
we
get,
leave
I'm not
it.
trying to get hung up on terminology.
Yeah,
It's just the
no.
concept of just
Yeah.
making sure that the person who lives over on East Cherry, who wants to go out there once or twice a year, still has access to a
Yes.
public course. That's
Yeah, and
all.
I think that would be part of our mission statement, that this is part of the Fergus Falls and surrounding communities, that it's always available to be used. So,
Our group has gone to Minnewaska several times when our course is closed for an event. I mean, you just make a tee time and go over and play.
It says Minnewaska Fairways for all, FORE all.
Yeah, great question. So that was,
That's exactly what it, I mean,
that was
that's
the 501c3 that we started. We started that probably 5 years ago now, and it benefits the juniors and seniors and military in the area. So we pay for all of our juniors to play golf through that foundation. So part of that came with the 501c3 that's getting set up here, came from me going through that process. So, and it's a very, very beneficial for a lot of different reasons. So, yeah.
All right. Well, thank you guys
Yep.
for joining us today and for what you've
Bring that up in our.
put into the golf course to this point. And
Yeah.
thanks, Scott and Anthony, for continuing the conversations. We look forward to seeing you back here.
Yeah, we would like, while we're at it, because it gets busy in the spring, that if we could come back and just put on your calendars the first Monday in March after a subcommittee meets between now and then for an update. However, we can figure that out in our subcommittee, but I don't want to let this sit and go for a month or two and we all forget about it.
How about a Wednesday morning in March?
How about a Wednesday morning in April? I won't be here in March.
Or the subcommittee can report to your council at
Yeah,
the meeting
and
too.
that too, but
That's
yeah, I think it's good you come before us and
Whatever you guys
tell us
prefer.
how it's going. I mean, you know.
We'll work with Lynn to get it on a schedule and depending on either in
Yep,
last meeting in March or the first meeting in April on a Wednesday morning, you guys can come before us.
perfect, perfect.
And,
Yep,
and if you need anything before then, we'll assume that
Yep.
Scott and Anthony will be in touch with the council.
okay.
Okay.
Thanks for your time.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Appreciate you
Yeah,
guys.
thanks,
Thank
Scott.
you.
Thank you guys for
Yes.
being on that
Thank
video.
you.
Yes, thank you.